Her grieving millionaire repeated the same ritual in an ordinary burger joint, but the unexpected visit of a poor girl changed everything. With just a few words, she unearthed the truth behind a murder disguised as a tragedy. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Chapter 1. The Sunday Ritual. Robert Mitchell had once been the epitome of success in Manhattan's competitive financial district. At 53, he had built Mitchell Investments from the ground up, turning it into one of New York's most prestigious wealth management firms. His name had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune, his opinion sought after at economic forums worldwide, and his presence requested at every significant social event in the city. But that was before Caroline left. 6 months ago, his wife, of 22 years, had disappeared from his life, with nothing but a coldly worded letter left on their bedroom dresser. The abruptness of her departure had shattered something fundamental inside him. The vibrant, decisive CEO had become a hollow shell, going through the motions of life without truly living it. Now, on this crisp autumn Sunday in New York, Robert sat alone at Jimmy's Diner in Greenwich Village. Far from the Upper East Side penthouse, he could no longer bear to spend weekends in. The small, unassuming establishment, with its worn leather booths and 1950s decor, had become his sanctuary, the only place where he found a semblance of peace. "The usual, Mr. Mitchell?" asked Doris, the motherly waitress who had served him every Sunday for the past 6 months. Robert nodded, his eyes focused on the faded tabletop. "Yes, please. And Doris, I've told you, call me Robert." "Sure thing, honey," she replied with a knowing smile, writing down his order, a cheeseburger with extra pickles, sweet potato fries, and a chocolate shake, even though she knew it by heart. It was what Caroline always ordered when they occasionally ventured downtown for what she called their incognito dates. As Doris walked away, Robert's gaze drifted to the window. Outside, autumn leaves swirled in mini cyclones along the sidewalk. New Yorkers bustled past, living lives that continued to move forward while his remained frozen in time. His phone vibrated in his pocket, likely Thomas Anderson, his business partner and oldest friend, checking on him again. Thomas had been his rock these past months, stepping up to handle much of the day-to-day operations, while Robert struggled to regain his footing. He ignored the call. Sunday was his day to be alone with his thoughts, to sit in the booth that he and Caroline had shared during happier times. His ritual of remembrance and regret. The bell above the diner's door jingled, momentarily pulling Robert from his reverie. A small figure slipped inside, drawing his attention despite himself. It was a girl, no more than 10 or 11 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. What struck him most was her expression, a mixture of wariness and determination that seemed out of place on such a young face. The hostess approached her with a frown. "Are you looking for someone, sweetheart? We don't serve unaccompanied minors." The girl shrank back, her eyes darting around the diner until they locked with Robert's. Something in that gaze, a recognition that made no sense, caused him to straighten in his seat. "I'm waiting for my dad," the girl said confidently, pointing directly at Robert. "He's right there." Before Robert could protest, the girl had slipped past the confused hostess and slid into the booth across from him. Up close, he could see the smudges of dirt on her face and the frayed edges of her too thin jacket. "Kid, I don't know what you're playing at, but—" "You're Robert Mitchell," she interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. "You come here every Sunday at exactly 1:15 p.m. You always order the same thing, a cheeseburger with extra pickles, sweet potato fries, and a chocolate shake. You sit here for exactly 1 hour and 17 minutes. You leave a 30% tip. You never finish your fries." Robert stared at her, unsettled by the accuracy of her observations. "Have you been watching me?" The girl's shoulders tensed slightly, but her gaze remained unwavering. "I've been waiting for the right time to talk to you." "About what exactly?" Before she could answer, Doris returned with Robert's order. Her eyebrows rose at the sight of the girl. I didn't realize you had company today, Mr. Mitchell. Robert opened his mouth to explain, but the girl beat him to it. I'm Lily, she said with a bright smile that transformed her face. Mr. Mitchell is helping me with a school project about successful business people. Is it okay if I stay? Doris looked to Robert for confirmation. Something about the desperation hidden beneath the girl's confident facade made him nod. Would you like something to eat too, Lily? Doris asked. The girl's eyes flickered to the plate of food, a flash of hunger crossing her face before she composed herself. No, thank you. I already ate. The slight rumble from her stomach betrayed her lie, but Doris tactfully pretended not to notice and walked away. Why don't you have some of my fries? Robert pushed the plate toward her. You said it yourself. I never finish them anyway. Lily hesitated for only a moment before taking a fry. She ate it slowly, savoring each bite in a way that suggested warm meals weren't a regular occurrence in her life. So, Lily, do you want to tell me why you've been watching me and what you really want? She finished chewing before answering. I need to tell you something important, but you probably won't believe me. Try me. Robert was surprised to find himself genuinely curious. It was the first real emotion he'd felt in months, beyond the dull ache of abandonment. I know why your wife left you. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. He stared at the girl, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. What did you say? I know why Caroline left, Lily repeated quietly, and it wasn't for the reasons you think. How could you possibly... She didn't stop loving you, Lily continued, her eyes now fixed on the plate of fries. She was tricked into leaving. A cold feeling spread through Robert's chest. That's enough. I don't know who put you up to this, but Thomas Anderson, Lily said, looking up to meet his gaze again. Your business partner, your best friend, the man who's been visiting your company's offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands every month since your wife left. Robert froze, his burger forgotten. What are you talking about? How would you know anything about our company's finances? I know a lot of things I shouldn't, Lily replied, a shadow crossing her face. But I need something from you first before I tell you everything. What? A promise. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I need a safe place to stay. Just for a while. And then I'll tell you everything I know. About Caroline, about Thomas, and about what's really happening to your company while you've been lost in grief. Robert studied the girl's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. Instead, he saw only fear mixed with that same unnerving determination he'd noticed when she first entered. Why should I trust you? You're a child who's been stalking me, making wild claims about my personal life and my business. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She placed it on the table and slid it toward him. Because I can prove it. This is just the beginning. There's a lot more where this came from. Robert unfolded the paper and his blood ran cold. It was a printout of a bank transfer from a Mitchell Investments account he didn't recognize to a private account in Switzerland. The amount was staggering, $15 million. The authorization signature at the bottom was his own. Except Robert had never authorized this transfer, had never even seen this account number before. How did you get this? He whispered, suddenly aware that they were in a public place. Lily glanced around nervously. I can't tell you here, it's not safe. She leaned forward, her voice barely audible. Mr. Mitchell, you're not the only one Thomas Anderson has hurt. I need your help as much as you need mine. The bell above the door jingled again. Lily's eyes darted toward the entrance, and her face went pale. Robert turned to look. Thomas Anderson had just walked into the diner, scanning the room with an expression of concern that would have seemed genuine to anyone who hadn't just seen the damning document now clutched in Robert's hand. We need to go, Lily whispered urgently. Now. And in that moment, looking at the fear in the girl's eyes and the familiar face of the man he'd trusted most in the world, Robert Mitchell made a decision that would change everything. Chapter 2. The Revelation. Robert acted on instinct. He slid out of the booth, dropped a $50 bill on the table, and guided Lily toward the diner's back exit. With one hand on her shoulder, he navigated through the narrow corridor past the restrooms, pushing through the door that led to the alley behind the building. "This way," he murmured, taking a sharp right and moving quickly down the narrow passageway. Years of navigating Manhattan's hidden shortcuts came back to him automatically. They emerged onto a quieter side street, Robert's mind racing as he tried to process what was happening. "My car's parked 2 blocks from here," he said, glancing down at Lily. Her face was set in determination as she kept pace with his longer strides. "We can't go to your car," she replied. "He might be tracking it." The thought hadn't occurred to Robert, but it made an unsettling amount of sense. If Thomas was involved in financial fraud using his signature, what else might he be capable of? "There's a boutique hotel on West 4th, Robert decided. "We can get a room there and figure out our next move." 15 minutes later, they were settled in a comfortably appointed suite at the Greenwich Retreat. Robert had paid in cash, using a name that wouldn't be easily traced back to him. The enormity of what he was doing, trusting a strange child with accusations against his closest friend, was beginning to sink in. Lily perched on the edge of an armchair, her small frame tense as if ready to bolt at any moment. Now that they were in better light, Robert could see how thin she was, the dark circles under her eyes suggesting many sleepless nights. "Start from the beginning," Robert said, sitting across from her. "And don't leave anything out." Lily took a deep breath. "My mom worked for your company 3 years ago. Her name was Sarah Taylor. She was in the accounting department." Robert searched his memory. The name was vaguely familiar, but Mitchell, investments employed hundreds of people. "I remember the name, but I didn't know her personally." "You wouldn't have. She wasn't high up enough to meet with the CEO," Lily said with a slight edge to her voice. "But she was good at her job, too good, actually. She started noticing irregularities in some of the offshore accounts, small amounts at first, then larger ones. And she reported this to Thomas," Robert guessed, the pieces starting to align. Lily nodded. "He told her it was part of a special investment strategy that you had approved. When she asked to see the documentation, he said it was confidential. But Mom was thorough. She kept digging." "What happened to her?" Robert asked, dreading the answer. "Thomas arranged for her to be fired, planted evidence that she was the one embezzling funds. She was devastated, not just about losing her job, but that no one believed her." Lily's voice wavered slightly. "We lost our apartment, had to move to a shelter for a while. Mom never recovered from it. She started drinking. And then she had just left one day. Left me with my aunt who barely has enough to feed her own kids." Robert felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He prided himself on knowing everything that happened in his company, yet somehow he'd missed this. "I'm sorry about your mother, Lily, but I still don't understand how this connects to Caroline. After Mum was gone, I started following Thomas. I wanted proof of what he'd done." Lily's expression hardened beyond her years. "I learned how to become invisible, how to listen without being noticed. Rich people never really see kids like me. We're just part of the background." She reached into her worn backpack and pulled out a small notebook. "I kept track of everything. Where he went, who he met with, what he said when he thought no one was listening. That's how I found out about the plan to get rid of you." "Get rid of me?" "Not like that," Lily clarified quickly. "He needed you out of the way, distracted. As long as you were happily married and focused on the business, he couldn't access the main accounts. The company bylaws require both founding partners' authorization for major transfers." Robert nodded slowly. This was true, a safeguard they'd put in place when they started the firm together. "So he targeted Caroline," Lily continued. "Started feeding her stories about you having affairs, showing her doctored photos, fake text messages. He even hired someone to call her pretending to be your mistress." Robert felt sick. Caroline would never believe that. "She knew me better than anyone." "Did she?" Lily asked pointedly. "Or did she know the version of you that you showed her? Thomas told her that power had changed you, that you'd become someone else when you were away from her. He had years of friendship with both of you to make his lies believable." The pieces were falling into place now. Caroline's growing distance in the months before she left, the strange questions she'd asked, her reluctance to attend company functions. At the time, he'd attributed it to the pressure of his work schedule, to the natural ebbs and flows of a long marriage. The final straw was when he convinced her that you were planning to divorce her once you secured the Westridge acquisition, Lily said. He showed her paperwork, divorce filings, asset divisions, custody arrangements for your vacation properties, all forgeries, but she didn't know that. The Westridge deal, Robert murmured. It had been the biggest acquisition in the company's history, worth billions. The deal had closed just days before Caroline left. He timed it perfectly. He convinced her that if she confronted you, you'd hide assets, that she needed to protect herself by leaving first. The letter she left, did it mention anything about lawyers or settlements? Robert nodded numbly. It said her attorney would be in touch about the division of assets, but no attorney ever contacted me. Because there wasn't one, Lily explained. Thomas told her he'd handle the legal communications. He's been intercepting any attempts she's made to contact you directly. How do you know all this? Robert demanded, his mind reeling. Because I've been watching both of you. I followed her too after she left. She's staying at her sister's place in Connecticut. She's miserable, Mr. Mitchell. She thinks you betrayed her, just like Thomas. Betrayed my mom. Robert stood up abruptly, pacing the hotel room as he processed this information. It was outlandish, unbelievable, and yet it explained so much. The suddenness of Caroline's departure, the cold formality of her letter, so unlike her usual warmth, the fact that she'd left behind family heirlooms and personal mementos she would never have abandoned in a planned departure. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then Thomas has been systematically destroying my life while pretending to support me through it. Not just destroying it, Lily corrected, taking it. While you've been drowning in misery these past 6 months, he's been transferring company assets, redirecting client funds, and positioning himself to take complete control. The paperwork I showed you is just the tip of the iceberg. I need more proof, Robert said, his business instincts finally kicking back in. Something concrete that shows Thomas's involvement. Lily hesitated, then reached back into her backpack. I have something better. She pulled out an old smartphone. Voice recordings. Thomas talking to someone named Victor about the plan. To you and Caroline about the company. She tapped the screen and handed it to Robert. A moment later, Thomas's unmistakable voice filled the room. Mitchell's completely broken. Hasn't been to the office in weeks. The board is getting nervous, exactly as planned. Once we present the quarterly numbers, they'll be begging me to take full control. No, she hasn't contacted him. I've made sure of that. The offshore transfers are almost complete. Another month and we'll be ready for the final phase. Robert listened in growing horror as the man he'd trusted most in the world calmly discussed the systematic destruction of his life's work and his marriage. When the recording ended, the room fell silent. Robert sat heavily on the edge of the bed, his world completely upended for the second time in 6 months. Why? He finally asked. Why would he do this? We built this company together. He's already wealthy beyond most people's dreams. It's not about money, Lily said quietly. At least not only about money, it's about power, about winning. I heard him talking once. He said that he was tired of being Mitchell's right-hand man, that he deserved to be the one in charge, the one getting the recognition. Robert thought back over their 25-year friendship and partnership. Had there been signs he'd missed? Moments of resentment he'd overlooked? Perhaps there had been, buried beneath Thomas's unfailing support and camaraderie. What do you want from me, Lily? He asked finally. Why tell me all this? The girl's confident facade cracked slightly, revealing the vulnerable child beneath. I told you I need a safe place. My aunt's boyfriend. He's not a good person. I can't stay there anymore. And I thought... She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. You thought what? I thought maybe you'd help me if I helped you, she admitted. That maybe we could help each other. Robert studied the small, fierce girl who had upended his understanding of the past 6 months, who had given him back a reason to fight when he'd all but surrendered. We need a plan, he said finally. Thomas won't give up everything he's worked for without a fight. And he has resources, connections. So do you, Lily pointed out. You've just forgotten how to use them. For the first time in months, Robert felt a spark of his old self returning. The strategist, the problem solver, the man who had built an empire from nothing but determination and vision. "First things first," he said, reaching for the hotel. "Phone. We need to get you some proper food and clothes. Then we need somewhere secure to stay while we figure this out. Somewhere Thomas wouldn't think to look for us." "I know a place," Lily offered. "A friend of my mom's has a cabin upstate. No one would connect it to either of us." Robert nodded, impressed by her foresight. "Perfect. But before we go anywhere, there's something I need to do." He pulled out his personal phone, the one Thomas had given him after claiming his old one had security vulnerabilities. "What are you doing?" Lily asked, watching as he removed the battery. "Getting rid of the most obvious way he could be tracking us," Robert replied. "And then I'm going to call Caroline from a clean line. It's time I heard her side of the story directly." For the first time since she'd entered the diner, Lily smiled. A genuine smile that transformed her solemn face into that of a normal child. "I told you you'd need my help, Mr. Mitchell." "Robert," he corrected. "I think after everything you've shared, you can call me Robert." Outside the hotel window, the New York skyline sparkled in the gathering dusk, a city of ambition, betrayal, and second chances. Somewhere within it, Thomas Anderson was making his next move, unaware that the game had suddenly changed. Chapter 3. The Refuge. The cabin in the Catskills was nothing like Robert's luxurious Manhattan penthouse, but as he stood on the rustic porch watching the sunrise over the mountains, he felt more at peace than he had in months. They had arrived late the previous night after a cautious journey upstate, stopping twice to switch rental cars and taking deliberately circuitous routes to ensure they weren't followed. Inside, Lily was still sleeping on the worn but comfortable sofa wrapped in a patchwork quilt. Robert had insisted she take the bedroom, but she'd refused, saying she slept better where she could see the exits. It was a heartbreaking glimpse into the life she'd been forced to live, always vigilant, never truly at rest. The cabin belonged to Eleanor Winters, a former teacher who had been friends with Lily's mother. When they'd arrived on her doorstep with their extraordinary story, she had welcomed them without hesitation, offering them the use of her family's vacation property for as long as they needed. "Sarah was one of the most honest people I've ever known," Eleanor had said, her eyes sad as she looked at Lily. "If she said something wasn't right at that company, then it wasn't. I always thought there was more to her dismissal than met the eye." Robert turned from the view as he heard movement. Inside the cabin, Lily emerged from her makeshift bed, her hair tousled from sleep but her eyes alert. "Any luck with Caroline?" she asked immediately. Robert shook his head. "Still no answer at her sister's place. I left another message, but I'm starting to think Thomas might have warned her about me trying to contact her." "Or she might not be there anymore," Lily suggested, accepting the mug of hot chocolate Robert offered her. "If I were hiding from someone I thought was trying to cheat me, I wouldn't stay in the first place they'd look." "You're probably right," Robert admitted. "I need to think like Caroline would think. If she believes I'm the enemy, where would she go that I wouldn't think to look?" Lily took a sip of her chocolate. "What about her friends? Does she have anyone she'd trust completely? Someone who'd keep her secret even from you?" Robert thought for a moment. "There's her college roommate, Jessica. They've stayed close over the years. Caroline always said Jessica was the one person who knew her better than I did. Do you know where Jessica lives?" "Boston. She's a professor at MIT. Robert was already reaching for the burner phone they'd purchased on their way upstate. "I have her number in my contacts, but your contacts are on your regular phone, which we can't use," Lily finished for him. She set down her mug and pulled out her own battered smartphone. "What's her last name?" "Bennett. Jessica Bennett." Lily's fingers flew across the screen. "There are 3 Jessica Bennetts listed as faculty at MIT, one in computer science, one in urban studies, and one in biological engineering." "Computer science," Robert said immediately. Caroline used to joke that Jessica could hack the Pentagon if she wanted to. "Found her," Lily confirmed, showing Robert the faculty profile page with Jessica's office number listed. "But we shouldn't call her office, too public." Her home number wouldn't be listed, Robert mused. And I can't exactly look through Caroline's things for her personal address book. We don't need to, Lily said with a slight smile. Dr. Bennett seems to be very active on social media. She just posted about a lecture she's giving tonight. At 7 p.m. in Building 32, Room 144. Robert raised an eyebrow. You're scarily good at this. When you spend enough time being invisible, you learn how to find information about people, Lily replied with a shrug. So, are we going to Boston? We? Robert shook his head. It's too risky for you to come with me. Thomas doesn't know about you yet, and that's our advantage. You should stay here with Eleanor. Lily's face immediately hardened. No, we're partners now. Besides, Caroline has never met me. I can go places and ask questions that you can't. Lily, you're what, 10 years old? 11, she corrected. And I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I'm the one who found you, remember? I'm the one who figured all this out. Robert couldn't argue with her logic, but the idea of putting a child in potential danger went against every instinct. Thomas is dangerous. He's already destroyed your mother's career and my marriage. Who knows what he'd do if he found out you were helping me? He won't find out, Lily insisted. I'm careful, and 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. Before Robert could respond, his burner phone rang, an unknown number. He exchanged a glance with Lily before answering cautiously. Hello? Robert, is that you? The familiar voice sent a jolt through him. Caroline? He could hardly believe it. How did you get this number? Jessica called me. She said she received a strange email asking about my whereabouts, claiming to be from you but sent from an address she didn't recognize. She forwarded it to me, and I knew something was wrong. The Robert I know would never write that way. Robert's mind raced. I didn't send any email, Caroline. We need to talk. There's so much I need to explain. No, Robert, I'm the one who needs to explain. Her voice wavered. I've made a terrible mistake. I think Thomas has been lying to me, to both of us. Relief flooded through him. He has. Caroline, where are you? We need to meet. There was a pause. How do I know this isn't another trick? Thomas showed me evidence, Robert. Photos, messages. All fabricated, Robert said firmly. Think about it, Caroline. In 22 years did I ever give you any real reason to doubt me, to doubt us? The silence on the other end of the line stretched on, and Robert feared he'd lost her again, then quietly, No, you never did. That's why it hurt so much when I thought you had. Tell me where you are, please. Another pause. I'm at Jessica's house in Cambridge, but Robert, if you're coming, come alone. I'm not ready to face anyone else yet. I understand. I'll be there as soon as I can. He hesitated, then added, I've missed you, Caroline, every day. I've missed you too, she whispered, and then the line went dead. Robert looked up to find Lily watching him intently. She wants to meet, he said. She's starting to see through Thomas's lies. That's good news, Lily said, though her expression remained guarded. But it could also be a trap. Thomas might have forced her to call you. The thought hadn't occurred to Robert, and he hated that it made sense. What would you suggest? We still go to Boston, but we're extra careful. We watch the house before you approach it. Make sure Thomas or his people aren't waiting for you. Robert nodded, impressed again by her strategic thinking. Agreed. We'll need to leave soon if we want to make it to Boston by evening. What about the company? Lily asked. While we're focusing on Caroline, Thomas is still stealing from you. One battle at a time, Robert replied. Without Caroline, nothing else matters. And her testimony about what Thomas told her will help build our case against him. They spent the next hour preparing for the journey, gathering what little they had brought with them and planning their route. Eleanor provided them with food for the trip and a set of keys to the cabin. Be careful, she told them as they prepared to leave, and Lily, your mother would be proud of you. The girl ducked her head, uncomfortable with the praise, but Robert saw the effect the words had on her. For all her toughness, she was still a child who had lost too much, too young. The drive to Boston took nearly 4 hours, filled with strategy discussions and contingency plans. Robert was continually impressed by Lily's sharp mind and attention. to detail. In another life, with proper opportunities, she could have been anything she wanted. How did you learn to do all this? He asked as they crossed the Massachusetts state line. The research, the planning, the way you think 10 steps ahead. Lily gazed out the window at the passing landscape. When everything keeps falling apart around you, you learn to predict what might break next. And Mom taught me a lot. She was always saying that information is power. She used to play these strategy games with me, teaching me to think about consequences, about what people might do based on what they want. She sounds like an extraordinary woman, Robert said gently. She was. Lily's voice was soft but steady. That's why I couldn't let Thomas get away with what he did to her, to us. They arrived in Cambridge as dusk was falling, the historic buildings of MIT silhouetted against the darkening sky. Following Lily's advice, they parked several blocks from Jessica's address and approached on foot, carefully scanning the area for anything suspicious. Jessica's home was a charming Victorian in a quiet neighborhood, lights glowing warmly in the windows. Robert felt his heart race as they observed from across the street, hidden in the shadows of a large elm tree. I don't see any unusual cars or people watching the house, Lily whispered, after 20 minutes of observation. Neither do I, Robert agreed. But I still think you should stay back while I approach. Find a spot where you can see the front door and the street. If anything seems wrong, if Thomas shows up or if I don't come out within an hour, call this number. He handed her a piece of paper with Eleanor's phone number. Tell her what happened and ask her to contact this detective I know in New York. His name is on the back. Lily folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her pocket. I don't like splitting up. Neither do I, but Caroline said to come alone. She's fragile right now, confused and hurt. Seeing a stranger might make her shut down. After a moment's hesitation, Lily nodded. 1 hour. If you're not back by then, I'm calling. Deal? Robert started to turn away, then paused. Thank you, Lily, for everything. Don't thank me yet, she replied with a hint of her usual sharpness. We still have a long way to go. Robert crossed the street, feeling exposed under the streetlights. As he approached Jessica's front door, doubt crept. And what if Caroline didn't believe him? What if she'd changed in the months they'd been apart? What if Thomas had poisoned her mind so thoroughly that there was no coming back? Taking a deep breath, he rang the doorbell. Seconds stretched into an eternity before the door opened, revealing not Caroline but Jessica Bennett, tall, angular, with the same intense gaze he remembered from their occasional social gatherings over the years. Robert, she said, her expression unreadable. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Where's Caroline? Jessica studied him carefully. She's here, but before I let you see her, I need to know something. What was the last birthday gift you gave her? A security question. Smart. A first edition of Jane Eyre, he answered without hesitation. Her favorite book since college. She cried when she opened it. Something in Jessica's posture relaxed slightly. Come in, she's in the living room. Robert stepped over the threshold, his heart pounding. And then he saw her, Caroline, standing by the fireplace, her honey blonde hair swept up in the simple knot he'd always loved, her blue eyes wide and uncertain as they met his. For a moment, neither of them moved. 6 months of separation, of manufactured betrayal and genuine pain hung in the air between them. Robert, she whispered finally, I don't know where to begin. Neither do I, he admitted, but maybe we could start with the truth. Chapter Merci 4. Broken Trusts. Jessica quietly excused herself, leaving Robert and Caroline alone in the tastefully decorated living room. The tension between them was palpable, years of trust and love tangled with months of hurt and confusion. You look tired, Caroline said softly, breaking the silence. Robert managed a small smile. So do you. She gestured to the sofa, and they sat down, maintaining a careful distance between them. Outside the window, Robert caught a glimpse of a small shadow moving. Lily, keeping watch as promised. I received divorce papers last week, Caroline began, her voice strained. They had your signature on them. Thomas delivered them personally, told me you were finally making it official now that the Westridge acquisition was complete. I never signed any divorce papers, Robert said firmly. Caroline, I haven't filed for divorce. I haven't even spoken to a lawyer. She studied his face carefully, searching for deception. The signature looked exactly like yours. It was forged, just like the transfers from our corporate accounts that I discovered yesterday. He leaned forward. Thomas has been manipulating both of us. He created evidence of affairs that never happened, intercepted our communications, and has been systematically stealing from the company while I was too consumed by losing you to notice. Caroline's hand trembled slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture he remembered so well. He showed me photos, Robert, you with other women. Doctored or completely innocent moments taken out of context. Robert reached slowly for her hand, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Think about it, Caroline. You know me. In 22 years have I ever given you reason to doubt my faithfulness? Her eyes welled with tears. No, that's what made it so devastating. It seemed so out of character that at first I couldn't believe it. But then Thomas had so much evidence. He had fabrications, Robert corrected gently, created specifically to drive us apart. But why? Caroline withdrew her hand, standing to pace the room. Thomas has been our friend for decades. He was the best man at our wedding, for heaven's sake. What could possibly motivate him to destroy our marriage? Control of Mitchell Investments, Robert replied. With me distracted by our separation, and you convinced I was betraying you, he's been able to siphon millions into offshore accounts. He's positioning himself to take over the company completely. Caroline stopped pacing, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension. The questions he kept asking me about the company structure, about the board members, I thought he was just keeping me informed, because you and I weren't speaking. He was gathering intelligence, Robert confirmed, using your trust in him to strengthen his position. I feel like such a fool, Caroline whispered, sinking back onto the sofa. To think that I believed him over you, that I let him convince me to walk away from our entire life together without even confronting you directly. You're not a fool, Robert insisted. Thomas is a master manipulator. He used our trust in him as a weapon against us. Caroline wiped away a tear. How did you figure it all out? What made you start investigating him after all this time? Robert hesitated. Explaining Lily's role would require revealing her complicated history, her mother's wrongful termination, and the precarious situation that had led her to seek him out. Yet he couldn't lie to Caroline, not now, when they were just beginning to rebuild their trust. Someone came to me with information, he said carefully. Someone who had also been hurt by Thomas and recognized the pattern in what he was doing. Who? Before Robert could answer, a sharp knock at the front door made them both start. Through the window, he spotted Lily pressed against the side of the house, making urgent gestures toward the street. Jessica appeared from the kitchen, moving toward the door, but Robert intercepted her. Don't answer it, he said quietly. Why? Todd? Jessica asked, but the question was answered by the sound of a familiar voice calling from outside. Caroline? It's Thomas, we need to talk. Caroline paled, her eyes meeting Robert's in alarm. What is he doing here? I didn't tell him I was staying with Jessica. You didn't have to, Robert replied grimly. He's probably been tracking my movements since I left New York, or yours. Jessica peered cautiously through the peephole. It's definitely Thomas, and he's not alone. There's another man with him. Robert's mind raced. They needed to leave, but the front door was no longer an option. Is there a back way out of here? Jessica nodded. Through the kitchen. It leads to the garden, and there's a gate that opens to the alley behind the houses. Robert, what's going on? Caroline asked, her voice tense. Are you saying Thomas is actually dangerous? I don't know his full capabilities, Robert admitted. But he's already shown he's willing to forge documents, create false evidence, and embezzle millions. I don't want to find out what else he might do when cornered. Another knock, more insistent this time. Caroline, I know you're in there. Your car is parked outside. This is important. It's about Robert. He's not being honest with you. The irony would have been laughable if the situation weren't so serious. Robert gestured toward the kitchen. We need to go now. Caroline hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Years of marriage had built an instinctive trust that, despite Thomas's best efforts, hadn't been completely destroyed. "What about your friend outside?" Jessica whispered, as they moved quietly toward the back of the house. "The one who was watching?" "The house," Robert started. "You saw her." "I'm a computer science professor. I'm trained to notice patterns and anomalies," Jessica replied with a slight smile. "Young girl trying very hard to be inconspicuous while maintaining surveillance on my house? Not exactly subtle." "We need to get to her," Robert said urgently. "She could be in danger if Thomas spots her." The knocking had turned to pounding now. "Caroline, this is ridiculous. We need to talk now." Jessica led them through the kitchen to a small mudroom with a door that opened onto a neatly maintained garden. "Go straight through and out the back gate. It leads to a service alley. Turn right and you'll reach Maple Street in about 50 yards. "What about you?" Caroline asked, concerned. "I'll be fine," Jessica assured her. "I'll tell Thomas you were here but left hours ago, headed for your sister's place in Connecticut. That should buy you some time." Robert squeezed her arm gratefully. "Thank you, Jessica, for everything." "Just fix this," she replied firmly. "Both the company and your marriage." They slipped out into the garden, the cool evening air carrying the scent of Jessica's carefully tended herbs. As they reached the gate, Robert heard the front door open and Thomas's voice drift through the house. They had escaped just in time. Once, in the alley, Robert pulled out his phone and sent a text to the number Lily had given him. "Meet at car. Thomas here." They hurried through the darkened alley, Caroline struggling to keep up in her impractical shoes. "Robert, slow down. I need to understand what's happening." "I'll explain everything once we're safe," he promised, guiding her around a puddle. "Right now, we need to get to the car and find Lily." "Lily? The person who helped me uncover what Thomas was doing. She's just a child, Caroline, 11 years old, but smarter and braver than most adults I know." Caroline stopped short. "You brought a child into this." "She brought herself into it," Robert corrected. "Her mother worked for Mitchell Investments. Thomas had her fired when she discovered some of his early financial manipulations. The experience destroyed her life." Understanding dawned on Caroline's face. "Sarah Taylor, I remember her. Thomas said she was caught embezzling funds." "Another of his lies," Robert said grimly. "She was the whistleblower, not the criminal." They reached Maple Street and turned toward where they had parked the rental car. Robert scanned the area anxiously, looking for any sign of Lily. The street was quiet, lined with parked cars and softly lit by old-fashioned street lamps. "Where is she?" He muttered, growing more concerned by the second. "Robert!" Caroline's voice was tense. "The car! Someone's there." He followed her gaze and felt his heart drop. A dark figure was leaning against their rental car, too tall to be Lily. As they watched, the figure straightened and stepped into the pool of light cast by a street lamp. It was Victor Harmon, Thomas's head of security at Mitchell Investments. "Mr. Mitchell," Victor called, his deep voice carrying in the quiet street. "Mr. Anderson asked me to escort you and Mrs. Mitchell back to New York. He's very concerned about your mental state." Robert instinctively pushed Caroline behind him. "Where's the girl who was watching the house?" Victor's expression remained impassive. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir." "If you've hurt her—" "Robert!" The urgent whisper came from behind them. They turned to see Lily emerging from between two parked cars, her face pale but determined. "Don't go near the car. He's got people watching both ends of the street." Victor's head snapped in her direction. "So this is your informant, Mitchell? A street kid?" He started moving toward them. "This has gone far enough. All of you need to come with me now." "Run," Robert said quietly, pushing both Caroline and Lily toward a narrow side street. "Now!" They fled, Victor's footsteps pounding behind them. The side street opened onto a busier thoroughfare, lined with restaurants and shops still open in the evening hours. Robert guided them into the flow of pedestrians, hoping to lose their pursuer in the crowd. "In here," Lily said suddenly, pulling them toward a small bookstore. They ducked inside, moving quickly past startled customers to the back of the shop. Is there another exit? Robert asked the confused-looking clerk. Just the employee entrance in the back, the young man replied, pointing to a door marked Staff Only. They pushed through it into a small stockroom and out another door that led to a service corridor. Several doors lined the hallway. This connects all the shops on this block, Lily explained. My mum and I used to live above a store like this in New York. All these old buildings have similar layouts. How do you know which way to go? Caroline asked, clearly impressed despite her confusion. Look for the exit signs, Lily replied, pointing to a glowing red sign at the end of the corridor. This way. They followed her through a maze of hallways, eventually emerging onto a different street several blocks from where they'd started. There was no sign of Victor or any other pursuers. We need transportation, Robert said, scanning the area, and a place to regroup. I know a motel near the edge of town, Lily suggested. Nothing fancy, but they take cash and don't ask questions. Caroline looked at the girl with new interest. You've done this before. Lily shrugged. Moving around, staying invisible, it's a survival skill. They flagged down a taxi, giving the driver directions to the area Lily had mentioned. As they drove through the darkening streets of Cambridge, Caroline studied Lily with a mixture of concern and curiosity. You're Sarah Taylor's daughter, she said finally. I met your mother once at a company holiday party. She had kind eyes. Lily looked surprised. You remember her? I make it a point to know the people who work for our company, Caroline replied. Your mother seemed very dedicated, very principled. She was, Lily said quietly. That's why she couldn't look the other way when she found the discrepancies in the accounts. Caroline reached across the seat and took Robert's hand. I should have known better than to believe Thomas over you. All those years together, and I let him convince me you'd changed. He exploited our trust, Robert said, both of us, and he nearly succeeded in taking everything we've built. Nearly, Caroline emphasized, a spark of her old determination returning to her eyes. But he hasn't won yet, has he? Robert squeezed her hand. No, and now that we're together again, he doesn't stand a chance. From her seat by the window, Lily watched their clasped hands, her expression unreadable. For all her toughness and intelligence, she was still a child who had lost her mother and been forced to grow up too quickly. Robert made a silent promise that whatever happened next, he would ensure Lily never had to fight alone again. The taxi pulled up in front of a nondescript motel on the outskirts of Cambridge. As they checked in and settled into a room with 2 queen beds, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were fugitives, in a sense, running from a man with considerable resources and apparently few moral boundaries. What's our next move? Caroline asked as they gathered around the small table in the corner of the room. Robert looked from his wife to the extraordinary child who had brought them back together. We stop running and start fighting back. It's time to take Thomas down and reclaim what's ours. Lily nodded approvingly. Now you're talking like a CEO again. Outside the motel window, the lights of Boston twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the world that continued to turn despite their personal drama. Somewhere in that world, Thomas Anderson was making his next move, still believing he held all the cards. He had no idea what was coming for him. Chapter 5. Turning the Tables. Dawn broke over the modest motel room, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Robert had barely slept, his mind racing with plans and counterplans, strategies and contingencies. Caroline dozed fitfully on one of the beds, while Lily had finally succumbed to exhaustion on the other, curled up like a small animal, ready to spring awake at the slightest disturbance. Robert watched them both, struck by the strange circumstances that had brought them together. His elegant, sophisticated wife and this street-smart, resilient child, both victims of Thomas's machinations, both essential to his undoing. His phone buzzed quietly, the burner phone they'd purchased at a convenience store after abandoning their compromised rental car. The message was from Jessica. T left Cambridge, heading back to NY according to what he told me. Said something about an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Robert's jaw tightened. An emergency board meeting could only mean one thing: Thomas was accelerating his takeover plan. With Robert missing and behaving erratically, Thomas would present himself as the stable, reliable leader who could guide the company through crisis. The board, concerned about investor confidence and market stability, would likely grant him temporary control, temporary that would quickly become permanent if Thomas had his way. Caroline stirred, opening her eyes to find Robert staring intently at his phone. "What is it?" "Thomas is calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow," he replied, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Lily. "He's making his move." Caroline sat up, instantly alert. "Then we need to make ours first." The determination in her voice reminded Robert of why they'd made such effective partners, both in business and in life. Caroline had never been just a CEO's wife. She had been his most trusted advisor, with a sharp mind for strategy and an intuitive understanding of people that had guided many of their most important decisions. "We can't just walk into the board meeting," Robert said. "Thomas has had months to poison the well. He's likely told them I'm unstable, paranoid. Any accusations I make will seem to confirm that narrative." "Then we don't make accusations," Caroline replied. "We present evidence, irrefutable documented evidence of what he's done." "Which we don't have," Robert pointed out, "at least not enough of it. We have Lily's recordings and the one transfer document she found, but Thomas could explain those away. We need more: account access logs, transaction histories, communication records, all of which are at the company headquarters, behind security that Thomas now controls," Caroline finished, understanding the problem. From the other bed came a small voice. "Not necessarily." They turned to find Lily sitting up, looking considerably less sleepy than someone who had just awakened. "I've been thinking about this," she continued. "Thomas has been careful with the company systems, but he's been using his personal devices too. His laptop, his phone, those would have records that he wouldn't expect anyone to access." Robert considered this. "We'd still need to get to those devices." "And we know where they'll be," Lily said, confidently. "At the board meeting, which is heavily secured and filled with people who currently think Robert is having some kind of breakdown," Caroline pointed out. "You could go," Lily suggested, looking at Caroline. "No one knows you're with Robert. As far as Thomas is concerned, you're still buying his story. You could approach him, say you've been thinking about what he told you, and you want to discuss next steps." Caroline's eyes widened at the implication. "You want me to distract him while someone else gets access to his devices?" "It would work," Robert said slowly, seeing the potential in the plan. "Thomas is arrogant enough to believe you're still under his influence, and your presence at the company wouldn't raise any alarms. You're still a major shareholder, after all." "But who would access his devices?" Caroline asked. "You can't go anywhere near the building, Robert. Security would stop you immediately." Lily cleared her throat meaningfully. "Absolutely not," Robert said firmly. "It's too dangerous." "I'm the only one who can do it," Lily insisted. "I'm small. I know how to move without being seen, and I understand what we're looking for. I've been in and out of that building before. How do you think I got those recordings in the first place?" Caroline looked at her with new respect. "You infiltrated Mitchell Investments? Alone?" "The security guards know all the executives and the regular employees, but no one notices a kid," Lily explained. "Especially if you look like you belong, carry a backpack, walk confidently, act like you're someone's daughter there for take." "Your child to work day." Robert shook his head. "It was risky enough when Thomas didn't know about you. Now that he's seen you with us, you'd be in real danger if caught." "He only saw me for a moment in the dark," Lily countered. "And I'll look completely different. Trust me, I know how to change my appearance enough to avoid recognition." Caroline and Robert exchanged concerned glances, both uncomfortable with putting a child in harm's way, yet aware that their options were limited. "What if we brought in professional help?" Caroline suggested. "Robert, what about that private investigator you used when we had the corporate espionage issue with Westridge?" "Malcolm Drake," Robert nodded. "He's good, but I don't know if we can trust him. Thomas may have gotten to him already." We don't need to trust him completely, Lily pointed out. Just enough to create a distraction while I do the real work. Robert studied the girl's determined face. Despite her youth, she had proven herself remarkably capable, and her stake in this was as personal as his own. Thomas had destroyed her mother's life, just as he had tried to destroy Robert's. I don't like it, he said finally, but I don't see another option that gets us what we need in time to stop tomorrow's board meeting. Caroline reached over to squeeze his hand. We'll be careful. We'll have contingency plans, and we won't let Lily take any unnecessary risks. Lily rolled her eyes slightly at being discussed, as if she weren't present. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I can handle this. Over the next hours, they refined their strategy, working through every detail with meticulous care. Caroline would return to New York openly, contacting Thomas to arrange a meeting before the board convened. Her story would be that she'd received the divorce papers and wanted to discuss the financial arrangements face to face. Meanwhile, Robert would remain out of sight but nearby, coordinating with Malcolm Drake, who would be hired for surveillance only. No details about their larger plan would be shared with him. And Lily, despite Robert's continuing reservations, would be responsible for accessing Thomas's laptop during the crucial window when Caroline had him distracted. His password is likely something predictable, Lily explained as they discussed the technical aspects. People like Thomas think they're too smart to be hacked, which makes them careless. It'll be something meaningful to him, something that feeds his ego. His boat is called the Conqueror, Caroline offered. He's absurdly proud of it. And his dog's name is Caesar, Robert added. He's always had a thing for powerful historical figures. Lily nodded, taking notes. Good. Those are exactly the kind of details we need. Once I'm in, I'll know what to look for. Suspicious transfers, unusual account activity, communications about the offshore accounts. By mid-morning, they were ready to put their plan into motion. Caroline used the burner phone to call her personal assistant, a woman who had worked with her for over a decade and whose loyalty was beyond question. Evelyn, it's me, she said when the assistant answered. I need your help, and I need absolute discretion. After arranging for fresh clothes to be delivered to a neutral location and ensuring that her return to New York wouldn't be immediately flagged to Thomas, Caroline turned to the more delicate matter of Lily's transformation. We need to make you look like you belong in a corporate environment, she explained, studying the girl thoughtfully. But not too polished. You still need to be believable as a child. A shopping trip to a nearby mall, conducted with careful attention to avoiding security cameras, yielded a selection of appropriate clothing, neat slacks, a button-down shirt, and a blazer that could pass for a school uniform with the right accessories. Her visit to a salon for a simple haircut completed the physical transformation. Remember, confidence is key, Caroline coached, as Lily practiced her walk and posture. Not too assertive. You're supposed to be slightly bored, slightly intimidated by the adult environment, but basically comfortable because your parent works there. I know how rich kids act, Lily replied with a hint of her usual edge. I've been watching them my whole life. As evening approached, they made their final preparations. Robert contacted Malcolm Drake using a series of cutouts and secured his services for the following day. Caroline reached out to Thomas, crafting a carefully worded message that hinted at reconciliation while establishing clear boundaries. Meeting confirmed for 9 a.m., she announced after receiving his reply. Before the board convenes at 10:30. He took the bait, Robert observed. He thinks he's still controlling the narrative. Men like Thomas always believe they're the smartest person in the room, Caroline said with a grim smile. It's their greatest weakness. They traveled back to New York separately, Caroline on a commercial flight using her own identification, projecting the image of a woman dealing with a difficult personal situation with dignity, Robert and Lily on a train, keeping a low profile, and maintaining the appearance of a father and daughter on an ordinary trip. By nightfall, they had established themselves in their respective positions. Caroline in the elegant Upper East Side apartment of a loyal friend who was traveling abroad. Robert and Lily in a modest hotel in Midtown, strategically located for quick access to the financial district. Their last communication before going dark was a brief phone call. "Be careful tomorrow," Robert told Caroline, his voice tight with concern. "Thomas is unpredictable. If anything seems off, abort immediately." "I will," she promised. "But this ends tomorrow, one way or another. I won't let him destroy everything we've built, or get away with what he did to Lily's mother." After hanging up, Robert turned to find Lily methodically checking the contents of her backpack, a small tablet computer, various cords and devices whose purpose he could only guess at, and the carefully chosen outfit for tomorrow's mission. "You should get some sleep," he suggested, noting the shadows under her eyes. "So should you," she countered without looking up. "Lily." His tone made her pause her inventory. "I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, you've already done more than enough. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you." For a moment, the tough facade cracked, and he glimpsed the vulnerable child beneath. "I just want him to pay for what he did to her," she said quietly, "for everyone to know the truth." "They will," Robert promised. "One way or another, the truth always comes out." She nodded, apparently satisfied, and returned to her preparations. Robert watched, marveling at her resilience and determination. In just a few days, this extraordinary child had not only given him back his sense of purpose, but had also helped him reclaim the most important relationship in his life. As he finally stretched out on the hotel bed, exhaustion overtaking him, Robert's last conscious thought was a promise. When this was over, he would make sure Lily had the childhood she deserved, safe, secure, and surrounded by people who appreciated her remarkable spirit. Dawn broke over Manhattan, the early light, gilding the steel and glass towers of the financial district. In 3 different locations, 3 people prepared for the confrontation that would determine not just the fate of a company, but the course of their lives. Caroline, elegant in a tailored navy suit, her composure masking the tension beneath. Lily, transformed into the picture of a corporate executive's daughter, her quick mind rehearsing every detail of the plan. And Robert, maintaining his position out of sight, but orchestrating their efforts, ready to step in if anything went wrong. The stage was set. The players were in position. It was time to take back what Thomas Anderson had stolen. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The Mitchell Investments building stood tall and imposing in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, its glass facade reflecting the morning sunlight. For 15 years, it had been the physical manifestation of Robert's vision and hard work, a beacon of stability and success in a volatile industry. Now, it felt like enemy territory. Caroline stepped out of the taxi at precisely 8:45 a.m., her designer handbag containing nothing but essentials and a small communication device disguised as a compact mirror. She nodded to the security guards, who recognized her immediately, their respectful nods confirming that Thomas hadn't removed her access privileges, at least not yet. "Mrs. Mitchell," the receptionist greeted her with barely concealed surprise. "It's wonderful to see you again." "Thank you, Diane," Caroline replied, with the warm, composed smile she had perfected over years of corporate events and charity galas. "Is Thomas in yet? We have a meeting scheduled." "Yes, ma'am, he arrived about 20 minutes ago. He's in the executive conference room preparing for the board meeting." Perfect. Thomas would be setting up his presentation, his laptop likely, connected to the conference room's display system. "I'll head up then," Caroline said, moving toward the executive elevator. As the doors closed behind her, she activated the communication device. "I'm in, heading to the conference room now. Thomas is already there." Across town, in a service entrance at the back of the building, Lily received the message through a similar device disguised as a smartphone. She adjusted her blazer, straightened her posture into what she called her private school pose, and approached the security desk with practiced confidence. "Hi, I'm Madison Williams," she announced, with a bright, slightly entitled smile. "My dad is Charles Williams from Legal. He told me to meet him here for Take Your Child to Work Day." The security guard looked confused. I don't think take your child to work day is scheduled until next month, miss. Lily's expression shifted to perfectly calibrated embarrassment. Oh no, did I get it wrong again? Dad's going to be so mad. He's always saying I never listen properly. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check a calendar. Wait, maybe it's just for the legal department. Dad said something about a special program they were doing. The guard's confusion turned to sympathy. Let me check the visitor log. Williams from legal, you said? Charles Williams, Lily confirmed, looking increasingly distressed. This is so embarrassing. The guard tapped at his computer. Yes, there is a Charles Williams in legal. Let me call up to verify. No, Lily said quickly, then modulated her tone. I mean, please don't. Dad's in meetings all morning. That's why he told me to come straight to his office. He'll be really upset if I interrupt him. She bit her lip. Could I just go up? I promise I'll stay out of trouble. I brought homework and everything. She patted her backpack. The guard hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and sympathy, for what appeared to be an anxious child trying to avoid parental disappointment. Please? Lily added, her voice small. I don't want to get in trouble again. It was the again that did it, suggesting a pattern of minor failures that made her story more believable. All right, the guard relented, printing a visitor badge. But you go straight to the legal department on the 14th floor, okay? No wandering around. Thank you so much. Lily's relief seemed genuine as she clipped the badge to her blazer. You're saving my life, seriously. As soon as she was in the elevator, Lily's expression shifted from grateful adolescent to focused operative. She pressed the button for the executive floor, the 28th, not the 14th, where the legal department was located. The visitor badge would get her past the basic security protocols, but timing was crucial. She needed to reach the executive conference room while Thomas was occupied with Caroline. Meanwhile, Caroline had arrived at the executive floor, her heart pounding despite her outward composure. As she approached the conference room, she could see Thomas through the glass walls, arranging documents on the large mahogany table. He looked up as she entered, surprise quickly masked by a welcoming smile that didn't reach his eyes. Caroline. He greeted her, coming around the table to take her hands. I was worried when you disappeared from Jessica's house last night. I needed time to think, she replied, allowing the contact but subtly creating distance between them. Your visit was unexpected. Thomas's expression shifted to concern. I was worried about you. When I realized Robert had contacted you, I feared he might try to manipulate you. He gestured to the chair beside him. Please, sit. We have the board meeting soon, but I can give you my full attention until then. Caroline sat, noting with satisfaction that Thomas's laptop was indeed connected to the conference room display, its screen showing a PowerPoint presentation titled Leadership Transition Plan. The sheer audacity of it, having prepared a complete strategy to usurp Robert's position, fueled her determination. I received the divorce papers, she said, keeping her voice steady. It seems very final. It is for the best, Thomas replied, his tone sympathetic but firm. Robert hasn't been himself for months. The board is increasingly concerned about his erratic behavior and extended absences. And you've been managing things in his place, Caroline observed, careful to keep any accusation from her tone. Someone had to step up, Thomas said with false modesty. The company can't run itself, and our clients expect stability. On the other side of the executive floor, the elevator doors opened and Lily emerged, walking with purpose but not hurry. She spotted a young assistant coming her way and immediately adopted a slightly lost expression. Excuse me, she said as the assistant approached. I'm looking for the restroom. Down the hall to the left, the woman replied with a quick smile. Thanks. Lily flashed her visitor badge casually as she passed, projecting absolute belonging in the space. Once out of sight, she navigated toward the executive conference room, using the building map she had memorized. As she approached, she could see Caroline and Thomas through the glass walls, deep in conversation. Thomas's back was to the door, his attention fully on Caroline. Now came the tricky part. The executive floor had a small service area adjacent to the conference room, a space used by catering staff during meetings. If Lily could access that area, she would be in position to reach Thomas's laptop when Caroline created the necessary distraction. She slipped into the service area unnoticed, finding it empty as expected at this hour. Through a small serving window, she could see Caroline nodding at something Thomas was saying, her expression carefully neutral. "I spoke with the board members individually," Thomas was explaining. "They agree that a clear succession plan is necessary given Robert's condition." "His condition?" Caroline repeated, her eyebrows rising slightly. "Caroline, you know as well as I do that Robert hasn't been stable since you left. He's paranoid, making accusations, disappearing for days at a time." Thomas leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I'm worried about him as his friend, but I also have a responsibility to the company." Caroline allowed herself to appear, thoughtful, even slightly swayed. "What exactly are you proposing at the board meeting?" Thomas turned to his laptop, pulling up a document. "A temporary transfer of executive authority, purely as a precautionary measure. It gives Robert time to get the help he needs, while ensuring the company remains stable. And if he doesn't agree to step aside? The bylaws allow for emergency succession in cases where a principal is incapacitated or demonstrably unable to fulfill their duties," Thomas explained smoothly. "It's all very standard corporate governance." Standard corporate theft was more like it, Caroline thought, but she maintained her contemplative expression. "Could I see the full proposal? If I'm to support this, I need to understand exactly what's involved." Thomas hesitated briefly, then nodded. "Of course, let me pull up the complete document." As he turned back to his laptop, Caroline accidentally knocked her handbag off the table, spilling its contents across the floor. "Oh," she exclaimed, bending down to gather her scattered belongings. "How clumsy of me." Thomas, ever the gentleman, when it served his purposes, immediately moved to help her. "Let me get those for you." The moment his back was fully turned, Lily made her move. Silent as a shadow, she slipped from the service area to the conference table, a small USB device in her hand. With practiced efficiency, she inserted it into the laptop, activated the program that would clone its contents, and retreated back to her hiding place, all in less than 30 seconds. Caroline, who had deliberately prolonged the cleanup by spreading items further with her movements, finally gathered everything back into her bag. "Thank you, Thomas. I'm not usually so scattered." "Understandable, given the circumstances," he replied, returning to his seat. "Now, about the proposal." As Thomas pulled up the document, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Excuse me, I need to take this. It's Victor." He stepped away from the table, moving toward the windows for privacy. Caroline used the opportunity to glance toward the service area, where Lily gave her a subtle thumbs up. The USB drive was copying everything they needed. Thomas returned, his expression troubled. "I apologize for the interruption. Where were we?" "You were about to show me the full succession proposal," Caroline reminded him. "Right." Thomas clicked through several screens, unaware that every file he accessed was being duplicated by Lily's device. "As you can see, the temporary measures would be reviewed after 90 days, with an option to extend if necessary." Caroline read through the document, her legal training allowing her to quickly identify the deceptive clauses buried within the standard corporate language. The temporary measures included permanent transfers of signing authority, irrevocable changes to account access protocols, and a restructuring of the executive team that would effectively solidify Thomas's control regardless of Robert's eventual status. "This seems very comprehensive," she observed, choosing her words carefully. "We need to be thorough," Thomas replied. "The stability of the company is at stake." In the service area, Lily's device beeped softly. The download was complete. She removed the USB drive from the laptop and secured it in her pocket. Now she needed to exit as quietly as she had entered. But as she prepared to leave, the door to the service area opened unexpectedly. Victor Harmon, Thomas's head of security, stood in the doorway, his expression darkening as he recognized her, despite her changed appearance. "You," he said quietly, reaching for her arm. Lily reacted instantly, ducking under his grasp and darting past him into the hallway. "Now!" she shouted toward the conference room. Caroline, hearing the commotion, immediately stood up. "What's going on?" Thomas turned, his face paling as he saw Lily sprinting down the hallway with Victor in pursuit. "What is she doing here?" he demanded, turning back to Caroline with sudden suspicion. "Did you—" "It's over, Thomas," Caroline said firmly. All pretense dropped. "We know everything, the manipulation, the forgeries, the embezzlement, all of it." Thomas's expression hardened. "You've made a serious mistake, Caroline. Whatever." "Robert has told you." "Isn't just from Robert," she interrupted. "We have proof, financial records, voice recordings, witness statements. Did you really think you could steal our company and destroy our marriage without consequences?" Outside in the hallway, Lily had reached the elevators, but Victor was closing in. She changed direction, heading for the emergency stairs instead. As she pushed through the door, she activated her communication device. "Phase 2, she shouted. "Now!" On the ground floor, Malcolm Drake received the signal. With precise timing, he activated the fire alarm system, sending a piercing wail through the entire building. Standard evacuation protocols would now force everyone, including Thomas, to exit via the stairs, creating the chaos they needed for Lily to escape undetected. In the conference room, Thomas's face contorted with rage as the alarm blared. "What have you done?" he demanded, grabbing Caroline's arm roughly. "Let go of me, Thomas," she said calmly despite her racing heart. "You're only making this worse for yourself." "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he hissed, his composure completely shattered. "I built this company as much as Robert did. It should have been mine years ago." "Sir, we need to evacuate," a security officer called from the doorway. "Fire protocol requires immediate building clearance." Thomas released Caroline's arm, his mind visibly racing as he tried to salvage the situation. "This isn't over," he warned her. "You're right about that," she replied, maintaining her dignity as she moved toward the door. "It's just beginning." As they joined the stream of employees filing toward the emergency stairs, Caroline scanned the crowd for any sign of Lily. The girl had followed their contingency plan perfectly: trigger the alarm and use the evacuation to blend in with the crowd. Outside the building, in a nondescript van parked across the street, Robert watched the evacuation through binoculars. He spotted Caroline emerging through the main entrance, her posture rigid but unharmed. Minutes later, a small figure in a school blazer slipped out through a side exit, moving quickly but not running to avoid attention. "Target 2 has exited," Robert confirmed through his communication device. "Proceeding to rendezvous point." 20 minutes later, they were reunited in a private room at the Hamilton Hotel, 10 blocks from Mitchell Investments. Lily triumphantly presented the USB drive containing Thomas's files. "He never even noticed," she reported, her eyes bright with the adrenaline of success. "And I got everything: emails, financial records, the fake documents he created, even recordings of his phone calls. He had it all just sitting there on his laptop, protected by the password Conqueror, like you predicted." Robert inserted the drive into his own secure laptop, and they gathered around to examine the evidence. What they found exceeded their expectations. Thomas had documented his own crimes meticulously, perhaps out of arrogance, perhaps from a businessman's habit of keeping detailed records. Either way, the evidence was damning and comprehensive. "There's something else," Lily said, pointing to a folder labeled Contingencies. Inside were detailed plans for various scenarios, including what Thomas would do if Robert somehow discovered his schemes. "He was prepared to frame me for the financial irregularities," Robert realized as he read through the documents. "He had forged evidence suggesting I was embezzling funds to support a gambling addiction. And look at this," Caroline added, pointing to another file. "He has a complete dossier on Sarah Taylor, Lily's mother, medical records suggesting substance abuse, fabricated performance reviews, everything he needed to destroy her credibility." Lily's face hardened as she looked at the evidence of how thoroughly her mother had been set up. "He didn't leave anything to chance." "No," Robert agreed grimly, "but neither did we." He turned to face them both, his expression resolute. "The board meeting is scheduled to reconvene tomorrow morning once the fire alarm situation is resolved. That gives us less than 24 hours to prepare our counterattack. Caroline nodded, already thinking ahead. We need to contact the board members individually, present our evidence before Thomas can spin a new narrative. And we need legal representation, Robert added. Someone Thomas hasn't gotten to yet. What about Patricia Winters? Caroline suggested. She's retired from corporate law, but she was your mentor at the beginning. Thomas never liked her. He wouldn't have cultivated a relationship there. Perfect, Robert agreed. And we should bring in financial forensics experts to verify the evidence, strengthen our case. As they strategized, Lily watched them with growing admiration. This was what her mother had tried to do, stand up for the truth, expose corruption, but she had stood alone. This time, the outcome would be different. What about me, she asked finally. What's my role in tomorrow's plan? Robert and Caroline exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Your role, Robert said gently, is to be safe and protected while we handle the confrontation. You've done more than enough, Lily. More than anyone could have asked of a child your age. Lily started to protest, but Caroline interjected. This isn't about excluding you. It's about protecting you. Thomas knows your face now, and he's desperate. We can't risk him retaliating against you. The girl considered this, clearly torn between her desire to see justice done and her understanding of the danger involved. Fine, she conceded finally. But I want to know everything that happens, every detail. You have my word, Robert promised. You'll be the first to know when Thomas Anderson finally faces the consequences of his actions. As evening fell over New York City, they finalized their preparations for the next day's confrontation. Patricia Winters had agreed to represent them, her formidable legal mind quickly grasping the significance of their evidence. Financial experts were reviewing the data, documenting the pattern of fraud and manipulation. And in a secure hotel suite, guarded by security personnel that Malcolm Drake had personally vetted, Lily waited, not patiently, but with the determined expectation of justice long delayed, but finally within reach. The stage was set for the final act in Thomas Anderson's elaborate drama, though not with the ending he had scripted for himself. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The Mitchell Investments boardroom had witnessed countless high-stakes negotiations, strategic decisions, and power plays over the years, but none quite like this. At precisely 9:30 a.m., the board members filed in, their expressions ranging from concerned to confused. The emergency meeting scheduled by Thomas Anderson had been postponed due to yesterday's fire alarm, then abruptly rescheduled with a cryptic agenda note about critical leadership matters. Thomas stood at the head of the table, impeccably dressed as always, though those who knew him well might have noticed the slight tension in his jaw, the faint shadows under his eyes, suggesting a sleepless night. He shuffled through his presentation, materials glancing occasionally at his watch. "Should we begin?" asked Eleanor Blackwood, the longest-serving board member and de facto leader in Robert's absence. "It's nearly 9:45. We're still waiting for—" Thomas began, but was interrupted by the boardroom doors swinging open. Robert Mitchell walked in, Caroline at his side. Behind them came Patricia Winters, the legendary corporate attorney whose reputation for both brilliance and uncompromising ethics had made her a formidable presence in New York legal circles before her retirement. "Robert," Eleanor exclaimed, half rising from her seat, "we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," Robert replied with a calm smile, "but as CEO of this company, I believe I should be present for discussions about its leadership. Don't you?" Thomas recovered quickly, smoothing his momentary shock beneath a mask of concern. "Robert, I'm glad you're here. We've all been worried about you. Your erratic behavior recently has been concerning." "Has it?" Robert set down his briefcase and took the chair at the opposite end of the table from Thomas, his usual seat. "I assume you're referring to my absence following my wife's departure, an absence you encouraged, if I recall correctly. Take time to process, Robert. I'll handle things here." He mimicked Thomas's concerned tone perfectly, causing several board members to shift uncomfortably. Thomas forced a sympathetic smile. "Your emotional state has been understandably fragile. That's why I've prepared a temporary succession plan, for your own good and for the stability of the company. How thoughtful, Robert replied. Before we discuss that, however, I believe the board should be made aware of some recent discoveries regarding the company's finances. Thomas's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. This isn't the appropriate forum for transparency. For truth, Robert interrupted, his voice hardening. I disagree. This is exactly the right forum. He opened his briefcase and distributed folders to each board member. What you're looking at is evidence of systematic financial fraud, document, forgery and corporate espionage, all perpetrated by Thomas Anderson over the past 6 months. The boardroom erupted in murmurs as the members flipped through the damning evidence. Thomas remained still, his face a mask of controlled fury. These are desperate fabrications, he said, when the initial shock subsided. Robert is clearly unwell, creating conspiracy theories to explain his wife's abandonment and his own professional failures. Actually, Caroline interjected smoothly, I'm right here and very much aware of who created the real conspiracy. The divorce papers that Thomas delivered to me were forgeries. The evidence of affairs he showed me was fabricated. The entire narrative he constructed was designed for one purpose, to remove Robert from the company so Thomas could take control. Eleanor Blackwood studied the documents with her customary thoroughness. These financial records show unauthorized transfers to offshore accounts. Is this accurate? It is, Patricia Winters confirmed, stepping forward. Forensic accountants verified every transaction. The pattern is clear and consistent. Mr. Anderson has been systematically siphoning funds and positioning himself to assume control through fraudulent means. Thomas scoffed, though a slight sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead. This is absurd. Robert disappears for days, behaves erratically, makes wild accusations, and you're all going to believe him over me. So I've been keeping this company afloat while he's been having a breakdown. A breakdown you engineered, Robert replied calmly, by separating me from my wife through manipulated evidence, isolating me from the company through fake concerns about my mental state, and simultaneously undermining both my marriage and my business. He turned to the board members. But don't take my word for it, listen to his. Robert played a selection of the audio recordings Lily had captured, Thomas discussing with Victor how they would finish off Robert's credibility, detailing the offshore account structures and plotting the takeover timeline. The color drained from Thomas's face as his own voice filled the room, damning him with every word. When the recordings ended, the silence in the boardroom was absolute. Thomas looked around the table, finding no allies in the shocked and disgusted expressions of the board members. This was taken out of context, he tried, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Robert has clearly manipulated these recordings. Tilt, the full unedited recordings have been authenticated by audio forensics experts, Patricia Winters interrupted, as have the documents recovered from your laptop, which include detailed plans for the takeover, evidence of financial fraud, and extensive documentation of your efforts to sabotage Mr. Mitchell's marriage and mental health. Thomas's composure finally cracked. You don't understand what it's been like, he spat, his voice rising, working in his shadow for 25 years, building this company alongside him, but always being treated as second best. It should have been mine. I deserved it more than he ever did. The raw bitterness in his voice silenced the room again. Robert studied his former friend with a mixture of sadness and disgust. We built this together, Thomas. You were my partner, my confidant. You were family. I was your sidekick, Thomas retorted. Always Mitchell and Anderson, never Anderson and Mitchell. Do you have any idea what that's like? To always be the afterthought? So you decided to destroy not just me, but an innocent woman who simply did her job with integrity, Robert asked, thinking of Sarah Taylor, Lily's mother. You ruined her career, her reputation, her life, all, because she discovered your early attempts at embezzlement. Thomas's eyes narrowed. How do you know about that? Who told you about Sarah Taylor? Her daughter, Robert replied simply. A remarkable 11-year-old girl who did what none of us accomplished. She saw through your deceptions and gathered the evidence to expose you. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Thomas's face as he realized the extent of his defeat. He looked wildly around the table, seeking any sympathetic face, any potential ally. Finding none, he reached for his last card. "This is all very dramatic, but ultimately unprovable in any meaningful legal sense," he said, regaining some of his composure. "By the time any of these allegations could be properly investigated, the damage to the company's reputation would be severe. Markets hate uncertainty. Clients would flee. That's why we've already met with the SEC and the District Attorney's Office," Patricia Winters informed him coolly. "With their cooperation, we've structured this as a private corporate matter with a clear resolution path that protects the company while ensuring accountability." Eleanor Blackwood cleared her throat. "I believe we've heard enough. I move for an immediate vote on the removal of Thomas Anderson from all positions within Mitchell Investments, the freezing of his company, assets pending full investigation, and the reinstatement of Robert Mitchell as active CEO." The vote was unanimous. Thomas sat motionless as his 25-year career and his elaborate scheme collapsed around him. "Security will escort you from the building," Robert said quietly. "Your access to all company systems has already been revoked. Any personal items will be packed and delivered to your attorney." Thomas stood slowly, straightening his tie in a reflexive gesture of dignity. "This isn't over, Robert." "Yes, Thomas," Robert replied with finality. "It is." As security personnel appeared at the boardroom doors, Thomas had one final question. "The girl, Taylor's daughter, how did she find you? How did she know?" Robert simply shook his head. "She watched, she listened, she connected the dots that the rest of us missed. In the end, you were undone by someone you considered completely insignificant, a child you never even noticed." With that, Thomas Anderson was escorted from the building he had once expected to rule, his expression frozen in disbelief at how completely his carefully constructed plans had unraveled. The remainder of the board meeting was focused on damage, control, financial recovery strategies, and the reinstatement of Robert's executive authority. By noon, the immediate crisis had been contained, though the work of rebuilding trust and recovering misappropriated funds would take months. "You should go to her," Eleanor told Robert as the meeting concluded. "The girl who saved your company deserves to hear about this victory from you directly." Robert nodded gratefully. "That's exactly where I'm headed." In the secure hotel suite across town, Lily paced anxiously, unable to concentrate on the books or television programs the security team had provided. When the knock finally came, she nearly leapt to the door, pulling it open to find Robert and Caroline standing there, their expressions telling her everything she needed to know. "It worked?" she asked, barely containing her excitement. "It worked," Robert confirmed with a smile. "Thomas has been removed from the company. The evidence has been turned over to the authorities. His assets have been frozen pending investigation." Lily's carefully maintained composure finally broke. She flung herself forward, wrapping her arms around Robert in a fierce hug that caught him by surprise. After a moment of hesitation, he returned the embrace, feeling the slight trembling in her small frame. Relief, triumph, and perhaps the release of a burden carried far too long. "What happens now?" she asked when she finally stepped back, slightly embarrassed by her emotional display. Robert and Caroline exchanged a meaningful glance. "That's something we wanted to discuss with you," Caroline said gently. "We've been in touch with social services about your situation." Lily's face immediately hardened, her walls coming back up. "I'm not going back to my aunt's. Her boyfriend is—" "We know," Robert interrupted. "That's not what we're proposing." Caroline stepped forward, taking Lily's hand in hers. "We were hoping, if you're open to the idea, that you might consider staying with us, not just temporarily, but permanently." Lily stared at them, processing the implication. "You mean, like adoption?" "Exactly like adoption," Robert confirmed. "It would take time, of course, legal procedures, home studies, approvals, but we've already spoken with Patricia about initiating the process." "Why?" Lily asked, her voice small, vulnerable in a way they hadn't heard before. "Why would you want me?" "Because you're extraordinary," Caroline said simply. "Because you deserve a home where your intelligence, courage, and integrity are valued. Because in just a few days, you've become incredibly important to both of us." And because your mother deserved better than what happened to her, Robert added quietly. We can't change that, but we can make sure her daughter has every opportunity she should have had. Lily looked between them, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm not easy to live with, she warned. I have nightmares I don't trust easily. I question everything. Good, Robert replied with a genuine smile. Those qualities saved my company and my marriage. I wouldn't want you any other way. For a long moment, Lily stood silent, weighing their offer against a lifetime of disappointments and abandoned hopes. Then slowly she nodded. I'd like that, she said quietly. I'd like that very much. 3 months later, the Mitchell penthouse overlooking Central Park was transformed from a place of lonely solitude to a home filled with life again. Lily's adoption was proceeding smoothly. Her academic placement tests had astonished the administrators at Manhattan's most prestigious private school, and the family, unconventional but undeniably real, had developed routines and rituals that honored both the past and their new shared future. One such ritual remained constant: Sunday afternoons at Jimmy's Diner, where they sat in the same booth Robert had once occupied alone in his grief. The old waitress, Doris, had come to adore Lily, always bringing her extra pickles without being asked. I have something for you, Robert said during one such Sunday visit, sliding a small box across the table to Lily. She opened it curiously to find a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature hamburger. To commemorate where it all began, he explained, as she examined it with wonder, the day a remarkable young girl traded a secret for a meal and changed everything. It wasn't really a trade, Lily admitted with a small smile. I would have told you anyway. I just needed an excuse to approach you. Smart strategy, Caroline noted with approval. Always find a way to make the other person feel like they're getting something in return. Lily slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, admiring how it caught the light. Do you ever miss it? She asked Robert suddenly. The way things were before, when you were just a successful businessman with a normal life. Robert considered the question seriously. No, he said finally. That life was comfortable, but incomplete in ways I didn't even recognize until it was disrupted. He looked between Caroline and Lily, his wife, who had found her way back to him through the darkness of betrayal, and this extraordinary child, who had brought truth into their lives when they needed it most. Some things need to break before they can become what they're truly meant to be, he said quietly. What we have now, this family we've created, is worth everything we went through to find it. Outside the diner window, New York continued its relentless pace, pedestrians hurrying past unaware of the small miracle taking place within. 3 lives that had been shattered by one man's ambition, now carefully reassembled into something stronger and more beautiful than before. And in a booth at Jimmy's Diner, over cheeseburgers with extra pickles and shared sweet potato fries, a new family celebrated the power of unexpected connections, second chances, and the simple truth that sometimes the most valuable secrets are worth far more than any fortune.